All right, AP Government students, this is Mr. Martyrum with the second part of our overview of campaigns and elections. So in video one, we talked about kind of the road to the nomination. We said that the process begins very early on, roughly 2 years before the campaign begins. It's a long road. You need a good grassroots effort, followed by your first wins in the primary where you build momentum. You get the backing of other party leaders and you work your way, raising money, you work your way to the nomination. Well, once you get that nomination, all bets are off, and it's a race to the finish line. It's a race to November. Typically, the nominations, the conventions are held maybe midsummer, maybe the end of July, maybe beginning of August, sometimes as late as the end of August. And then there's a little bit of downtime as the party regroups in those kind of the dog days of summer. But then really once Labor Day hits, it's September, October. It's just a 2 month grind to Election Day. So in this high-tech media campaign that we live in, right now candidates use what's called direct mail to generate support for their candidates. Direct mail can be very simply a piece of mail that comes to you listing reasons why you should vote for the candidate. Or perhaps if the campaign goes negative, they send you a piece about why the other candidate is the wrong choice. But the important thing is they target people that get certain mailings. For example, if you are a Democrat that has voted in every primary election, that has voted in every general election, you have a good voting record, you may not get a mail piece because typically the campaign can depend on you. Perhaps you'll get something that's very incendiary to kind of fire you up, but for the most part, the campaigns can count on your support. A lot of mail goes to somewhat independent voters, maybe moderates who haven't made up their mind, so they're looking both ways. Also, the idea is to hold big events, and when you hold big events in local areas, you get free media coverage. For example, one of the most expensive media markets in the United States is the Philly, New York media market, this area right here. Well, when Hillary Clinton came to town the night before the election, you had the local news. You had CB, the Eyewitness 3. You had Action News. All these news people were covering the event, and therefore was being broadcasted through the tri-state area. And Hillary Clinton didn't have to worry about running ads during that time because she had free marketing, and the Republicans do it just as well. So you hold these big events in order to get a lot of free press. There's the emphasis on marketing the candidate, making the candidate, the candidate will walk out with his wife and kids, you know, perhaps in certain areas of the country, the president or the candidate won't wear a suit jacket or tie to make him appear a little bit more folksy. He's not going to wear a three-piece suit and your top-of-the-line shoes when you're speaking to a crowd of urban poor, or if you're out speaking to a group of farmers. You kind of want to blend in. But a lot of the horse or the stories in the news, it's going to focus on the minutia, the kind of the day-to-day horse race. Who's up in the polls, who's down in the polls, and that's when we talked about polls earlier on in the year. We talked, is there a possibility that we're oversampling our population because there's just so many polls out there um, to really determine who's up and who's down. Um, but that's what the press focus on. The press likes to focus on who's up in the polls, who's down in the polls, who's gaining ground, who's picking up ground. They really don't focus on the policy issues. And if you recall our conversations from the 2016 election, there weren't a whole lot of policy issues that were discussed among either candidate. All right, so how do you organize the campaign? And that's kind of important. Right. So you need a campaign manager, and this is going to be the guy or girl who oversees the campaign, the day-to-day operations. They're going to be in charge of making sure the candidate is on message, making sure that, if if their message of the day is education, that no matter what, the candidate is always around children and schools. So no matter what, no matter how hard the media is attacking him, there's always going to be that image of him in front of a school with children. A contemporary example, this flipped classroom is being recorded during the first week of Donald Trump's presidency. The Trump organization has done a very good job of making their candidate appear presidential. They know that the president can sometimes veer off message, so they have been holding quick events in the Oval Office where the president and his staff walk in, he sits at the desk, takes out the presidential pen and signs a couple of executive orders and says why he did it, and then that's it. Very quick, but what's being reported on the news to all the voters is, the president's taking legislative action. Very quick, but could be effective. It makes him look more presidential. And don't be fooled, that is a very effective campaign strategy, because the presidency is nothing more than the constant campaign. But on the campaign, you hire media and campaign consultants, and these are people that look at every possible issue and try and figure out every possible way to answer an angle and pick up an advantage over your opponent. You want to assemble your staff, and you want to plan logistics from, paying for planes, travel, how you're getting around the country, when you're going to speak, where you're going to speak, who you're going to speak with. You also need a research staff, policy advisors, pollsters, and you need a tremendous press secretary. Because if the candidate does veer off message, you're going to need someone to go in and kind of act as a cleanup crew, as a pit stop. To clarify any comments that the candidate made. And it's also good to have a good press secretary to spin any stories to your advantage. So having the right campaign staff is timeless and valuable to a good candidate. All right. One thing on there, we said establish a website. That was the last piece on there. That's kind of outdated. Any campaign, any serious campaign is going to have obviously a website, but also the social media aspect of it. As we said, 2008 was the year of Facebook and YouTube for Barack Obama getting his message out. 2016 was the year of Twitter for Donald Trump to get his message out. All right. This chart just reinforces the idea of policy versus the horse race. It'll be very interesting to see what 2016 looks like, but the major elections of the late 20th and early 21st century shows that this is all about a horse race. That's the story that gets covered. Who's up in the polls, who's down in the polls. The policy issues, where the candidates stand on these issues, that's not getting covered nearly as much. In 2004, it was. So I'm curious to see what the trend is going to look like in 2008, 2012, and 2016. All right, a couple things to discuss as far as campaign finance reforms. This is important because you need to understand how the candidates can raise money. The Federal Election Campaign Act, the FEC, was created in 1974, and this organization was set up to determine what you can do with certain funds and monies. Now, you have to ask yourself, what happened in the early 1970s? Why 1974? Why did Congress all of a sudden decide they wanted to take a crack at campaign finance reform? Well, Watergate, 1972. And with Nixon's resignation, this is a response to that. You have to understand, Nixon was using that campaign money for other activities, possibly hush fund for the Watergate burglars. He was moving that money all around, and that was the kind of the saying that Deep Throat was telling Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein was to follow the money, because the Nixon campaign was using that money pretty recklessly. So the FEC was established, and it provides public financing for presidential primaries, as well as matching funds for other candidates. And it also requires, most importantly, the candidates to fully disclose where they're getting their money from and from whom. There's a couple things that you need to make note of. Soft money, the McCain-Feingold Act, and something called 527s. So soft money is a political contribution that is not subject to contribution limits. You can use this money not for a candidate, but for party building. Okay, and that's kind of important. So soft money can be used to say, let's use abortion for example. So say you're a Republican. You can use soft money for an ad that talks about, family values and pro-choice. The problem in the campaign, you cannot mention a specific candidate. So if you're using soft money, you have to be very generic, very vanilla with how you're using that money. But it's almost inferred that this is the candidate you're talking about. In 2002, John McCain and Russ Feingold passed the Russ Feingold campaign. This bans soft money, but now it increases the amount of individual contributions, and these contributions are used to create issue ads. And that will give rise to a group called 527s. And these are independent groups that try to influence the political process, but they're not subject to campaign contribution restrictions because they are not directly seeking the election of a particular candidate. So if 527 may generate a commercial saying, please, education is important, a good education is important, so support the candidate that has the good education record. Well, if this is an election year where they're talking about education and perhaps school vouchers or something like that, it might be quite clear that, in fact, they want you to vote for the Republican candidate that's going to provide choice for your kids. So that is very important because these 527s are popping up all over the place. And again, it's kind of the 527 is a way around the McCain-Feingold Act, which sought to limit soft money. So soft money has more or less made its way back into the mainstream election process. All right. We also have something called PACs, Political Action Committees. All right. PACs in the past couple of years have exploded. There's thousands of PACs. They're created by law to allow corporations, labor unions to donate money to campaigns. You have to register, and you are monitored by the FEC. As of 2006, so this is quite dated, this information, there were 4,200 PACs. I'm willing to bet that that number has doubled, maybe even tripled. And as of the time of this textbook, there were over $372 million in PAC money. That's huge. I mean, the money is coming in at an alarming rate, and PACs will donate to candidates who support their issue. And as we said when we talked about interest groups last week, PACs may donate to both campaigns. They may donate X dollar amount to the Republican candidate who is the incumbent, and they'll donate a little bit to the Democrat because in the off chance that the Democrat does win, they're hedging their bets. They, quote, don't buy candidates, but they support the candidates who come in first place. All right. One of the questions that people like to ask, are campaigns becoming too expensive? Fundraising takes a lot of time. Congressmen, senators, people running for president, they are tapping into people, asking them constantly to donate, to pay for polls, to pay for ads, to pay for whatever the campaign needs. Some of the effects that the campaign will have on voters. They reinforce, they activate, and they open up a conversation. So a couple things that campaigns that weaken with the impact on voters. Selective perception. People pay attention to most things that they agree with. We've seen that. Party identification is still gonna influence the voting behavior. So if you are a registered Democrat, most likely you're going to come out and vote for the Democratic person who's on the top of the ticket. You're not going to cross party lines. But most importantly is incumbency, and incumbents, they have a huge advantage. Maybe not so much in a presidential race, but in a congressional and senatorial race, congressional candidates have name recognition. Frank LoBiondo, Congressman LoBiondo, has been in this district for quite a while now, since 1994, over 20 years. He has brand name. He has name recognition. So for him to run a re-election, he's got a very easy advantage over his opponents. Finishing up with campaigns, are the nominations and campaigns too democratic? Campaigns are open to everyone. They consume a lot of time and a lot of money. And if you figure, we have the next 9 months, we have a respite from the campaigns. But a year from now, come January, the issue is going to be, Democrats are trying to take back the House, take back the Senate from Republican control. Republicans want to defend that. So we're gearing up for an election season already. The next question to ask is, do campaigns lead to an increased scope of government? Meaning, is the government better for campaigns, or is it harder because of this constant cycle of constant campaigning? Candidates are spending more time campaigning and less time governing. And that is a big issue. Some people say that campaigning is governing, but if you're spending all your time out there talking about helping, you spend less time out there in Washington helping people and helping your constituency. All right. Just in summation, what we talked about in the two videos, campaigns are media oriented and expensive. Delegates are selected through the caucus system, and money contributions from PACs is regulated by the FEC. They are essential to the campaigns. And campaigns reinforce perceptions, but very rarely, believe it or not, for the amount of money they get spent, campaigns really don't change a lot of people's minds. All right. If you need to watch the video again, please do so. But make sure you've taken the appropriate notes in your outline. If you have any questions, you can post them on Edmodo or talk to me in class.